Okay, welcome back. So what I'm doing today is in process of load development on this Seekins rifle. So again, this is the Seekins Havoc PH3 in 6.5 Creedmoor. I'm working on doing load development for this rifle. And as part of my process for that, so what I typically do is I take my usually, like I said, I shoot a lot of Hornady bullets, and I do have a lot of Berger. I have ordered some Nosler bullets. I want to try those too. But what I always do is I will take my manual, and then in my manual, I'll find the bullet that I'm shooting and the recommended coal for that. So I start out loading, when I'm doing my load development, I start out loading using that coal that's recommended in the manual. So that'll meet SAMI specs. I haven't found or run into any issues in doing that so far. I feel like that's kind of like a basis, you know, that should work and fit in every rifle. So I always, you know, kind of just start out doing my load development and going by what the manual recommends and following it, you know, as a true guide. And sometimes it works out great. I mean, I've started load development on rifles, and when I use the coal in the manual, is shot perfectly, and I can get down to those, you know, 1/4 inch groups. You know, I have had a lot of comments on the load development so far, and some people say, you know, you're putting too much emphasis on powder charges, on the bullets. Everybody's got their own opinion with things. And like I said, I'm your average Joe. I'm not a professional, but, you know, I'm 45 years old. I started shooting guns with my dad when I was like 5 or 6 years old. I've been shooting ever since. I can't tell you how many hundreds of rifles I've had and shot. My dad's had, you know, family members, friends, just so many. I've done so much shooting over my lifetime. Now, I am newer to reloading for centerfire. So like I've mentioned before, I've been doing that just over approaching 2.5 years. So I am newer to it, but even in my time of doing reloading so far, I've reloaded lots of ammunition. I don't, you know, I probably, so when we look at 22 LR and the competition I did last year, I shot roughly, I went through about 1,200 rounds just in that one rifle, and that's 22 LR. In a lot of my other rifles, I probably went through at least like a couple thousand rounds, at least, like minimum. So I've done a good bit of reloading, and I've researched a lot, and I've talked to a lot of people. I talked to a lot of people at the range. Everybody's got their different opinions on what works, what doesn't work. Some people get frustrated and irritated by it. I don't even understand. They're like, well, you know, if you don't do it this particular way, then you fail, or it's just not going to work. Absolutely no way possible. And all these types, you know, situations and scenarios. Even when I'm doing my load development, you know, some people say that there's no way, or it's not going to work doing it off of a lead sled, or you need to be using a bag, or you need to use a certain like bench rest, or you need to use this or do this. Then when I was out at the range doing some load development, there happened to be another guy out there. He was doing load development for a 6mm Creedmoor. Actually a CZ, I forgot the actual like model of it, and 6 Creedmoor, and he was using a lead sled, and he was shooting 0.3 inch groups out there. So I mean, you know, they wouldn't sell these lead sleds if they didn't work and nobody used them. They wouldn't sell all these different tools and things if nobody bought them and they didn't work. So, you know, like I said, everybody's got their own opinions on everything. So just keep that in mind. And keep in mind that in my videos, this is just information that I've gathered and my opinions and how I do things. It doesn't make it right. I'm not telling anybody else you need to do it my way or that it works the best. It's just kind of how I do things and how I've learned so far. Now, at the same time, I love to read comments with, suggestions and things that have worked for other people. And I look at that stuff and take it seriously. And I might, modify some of the things I'm doing, or at least like try, your methods out to see if it improves anything for me. So when we're talking about, load development, when we're finding the cartridge overall length, this is not like a how-to video. This is just my opinion and proceeding in load development for this particular rifle. So I haven't gotten the groups that I would like to see out of this rifle yet. Now I've only tried one bullet weight. So what I am shooting so far, and the only thing I've been working with, are these Hornady ELDX 143 grain. And this is what I'm working with currently. Now, like I said, I do have, I've ordered some Hornady SSTs for this rifle, and I've also ordered some nozzlers. So we're going to try some different bullets. I have really been, let's see what we've got so far, and you could go back and review. And like I always say, I apologize, my handwriting is horrible. I have the handwriting of a first grader, but that's just what it is. So this is kind of the load development groups that we've seen so far. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure the coal of the rifle, measure out the lands and where it's hitting. And I'm going to try some different loads with that and see, how much difference it makes, see if we can tighten up those groups using this same bullet and kind of using maybe a powder charge we've already done. So I think we'll probably look at this, and I didn't get the chronograph readings off that one. But I think we're probably going to look at this H4350, like the 41.8, and probably go from there. We did pretty good with the 41, but I think I'm just going to go with this one and see what happens. So I'm going to try H4350 in the 41.8 charge, and then we're going to do some variations on the lands here, the cartridge overall length. So what I'm going to write down and note in my log is, for this particular bullet, I'm going to put the max coal that I can run, but I also want to put, and some people, so I know there's a lot of different opinions on this. So some people will measure just out to the bullet tip. I realize, and I get it, those plastic tips, there's variations in it, right? So some people tell me, you just can't do that way. It's not, accurate enough, or, it's not the same bullet to bullet. For what I'm doing, it's fine. This is not a bench rest rifle. I'm trying to get some consistent groups, under an inch. Yes, I want to try to get it a little bit better because I think this rifle is very capable of getting better. And I also think I'm better or more capable of actually shooting better. So I will do both. We'll use this tool, we'll measure out to the bullet tip, and then we'll use the Hornady comparator tool to get kind of the ogive reading as well. And then I already measured my magazine, so the max that I can go out to in the magazine for it to fit the magazine is 2.943. Now, if this was a bench rest rifle and I was just single feeding every time, I wouldn't care about the magazine. You can go out further, and you can go out further if you want to. It's just, I'm going to keep it within that, in what I can fit into the magazine, just so I can utilize that. All right, here's more opinions and controversy. There's different ways you can go about getting this measurement, you know, like where your bullet actually touches in the throat of the barrel. Um, my my preferred method, and just because I really think it's the easiest way to go about it, is I use this Hornady OAL gauge. It works, I think, fine for me. This is, like I said, we're not doing bench rest. It doesn't have to be ultimate accuracy, you know, super precision type stuff here. We're doing hunting loads and a hunting rifle. Um, there's other methods you can do it. You know, you can modify the bolt, pull out the firing pin, all this stuff, and do once fired brass and that, and different situation scenarios. Another method that I have done, and I've tried it previously, where you'll just take a previously fired case and you will use that and put a bullet in it with some thread locker in the back of the bullet and in the neck of the case. And you pull it out, you run it long, and then you put you put the bullet in there, throw the bolt on it, and then, you know, let it sit, let that thread locker dry and kind of lock it in place. You'll want to put some kind of like oil or lubricant on the tip of the bullet where it, you know, hits in the throat of the barrel so that it'll extract without modifying it or changing it. Then you pull that out, you know, and that'll give you a measurement that way. I've done that route. I mean, I just think that's a little bit more, to me, it's just time consuming, and you're basically scrapping a case, you know, that way. So to each their own. Like if you want to do whichever method, and like I said, there's 1,000 videos you can watch on everybody's different ways of doing this. But I think this works fine. So, you know, you just buy these like pre-drilled mock-up units, and then, you know, I've also see people say, well, I take a previously fired round and I bought a tap and die set. You know, I'm going to drill it out because there's going to be differences in the brass that you're using. So this is Hornady brass. So if you're shooting Peterson or Lapua or Lapua, whichever way you'll say it, you know, there's going to be variations to it, you know. So yes, that's true. When I'm doing these loads, I'm using Lapua, and this is Hornady. So yes, there might be a little bit of variation there, you know, but for what I'm trying to do, this is going to work. So I would say, you know, always put your bullet in you're going to be using, make sure this is tight, and then we're going to slide it in all the way till it won't go anymore. Right, make sure it's seated good in there. And I didn't put any lubrication on the tip of the bullet, so when I push it into the lands, which this one didn't go very far, and you don't want to, you got to do it by feel. You don't want to push extremely hard and like really force it, but just push it to where it stops, and tighten that down, and I'm sure the bullet will probably get stuck in there. We'll see. Sometimes they come out, sometimes they don't. Yep, it got stuck. So then you want to take just a cleaning rod and knock it out. So I'm going to move the rifle around in order to do that. I'm trying to find a cleaning rod. I don't have a jag on or anything right now. All right, so I'm going to stop the video for a second, and then I'm going to knock that out, and then we'll come back. Okay, knock the bullet out of the rifle, and there we have our maximum length. So then we'll take our calipers and we'll see what we get. Give me 1 second to get this situated. All right. So kind of wiggle it around a little bit. Make sure it's like flat. 2.907. So let me note that. All right, so the magazine max is 2.943, so we could run it out to max. Now you want to come off of the lands a little bit, which most people say. So this is more opinions and everything. If you follow Eric Cortina, you know, he says come. What he does is I think he does it. You know, starts out at 2,000 and then goes from there. I believe that's what he says in his process anyway. You know, there's some videos of people that will, they want it touching, you know, and they'll just start from that almost touching point. Really, as long as the bullet feeds, they'll try that. And then some people start 1,000 off, 2,000, 3,000. Some people go way back. So I guess it just depends, and every rifle and barrel might have a little variation to this. And I've found that, like in loads I've done, and it's like I said, I usually I'll start with the load manual's recommendation, and then I'll kind of go from there. But I've had rifles that I've load developed for, and then just by the manual and doing the recommended coal, I've shot the groups that I was satisfied with, so I didn't do this step or process. I just start into that if I'm kind of struggling to get it down where I want it. So then I start, you know, making changes and adjustments there. So then a lot of people also, they'll use this comparator tool, and we'll try that and get a measurement on that as well. I don't typically use the comparator tool. So you can put this one in, and then of course Hornady, they have numbers on them. So you look it up and they have a chart, and for, you know, each caliber bullet, they'll have a number and comparator you use. So you'll put that in there. This one's for 6.5, close it up, and we'll zero it on that. And then we'll see what we get. So if I'm going to be using the comparator to do the measurements, we're looking at 2.266. So I'll jot that down. All right, and I mean, that's it. That's all the steps I'm going to do with this one. My next thing or part of the process is I'll go to the loading bench and I'll start developing some different loads that are with that powder charge and this bullet, and we're going to we'll come off the lands in different increments. Then we'll go out the range and we'll see which one the gun likes best. Like I said, again, please do all the things like subscribe and all that good stuff. You know, comment below. You know, any opinions are welcome. I do ask that you keep it clean and family oriented. But other than that, you know, thanks for watching, and catch you on the next one.